District of Conservation is sponsored by the Committee for a Constructive Tomorrow, better known as CFACT. To learn more about our sponsor, head over to cfact.org. Thanks for listening to the program. Welcome to District of Conservation. I'm your host, Gabriella Hoffman. This podcast offers a sober examination into all things hunting, fishing, shooting sports, energy, environment, and the public policy surrounding it. And this podcast also specializes in original interviews that you won't hear elsewhere. Here's what I have for you today. We have a very special guest today on District of Conservation. Long time in the making. He was very integral to getting me access into the first Trump administration at Department of Interior. Really excited to have my friend Todd Wynn on the podcast today. Todd, good to have you on to talk about what's happening with stuff you're doing in Arizona, kind of the lay of the land of what your colleagues, successors at Interior are doing. So great to have you on.
Yeah, thanks for having me and taking the time to chat. Always like to hear from you.
Very appreciative of your time and expertise. And give a little bit about your background, because some people who follow the podcast probably are familiar with your work in the first Interior Department, but what led you to become interested in conservation issues? I know you're an outdoorsman, but maybe my listeners don't. So share your story.
Yeah, definitely. I think probably some of the stuff, I guess, where we had met as Department of Interior, I was appointed by President Trump to serve under the Secretary of Interior, both Ryan Zinke and David Bernhardt. And I served in the office of the secretary directly. There's 3 offices within that office, and I handled external and intergovernmental affairs, which I think the easiest way to say it is I represented the secretary and facilitated communication for him everywhere between Greenpeace and ExxonMobil and everything in between, including all the sportsman conservation groups. And then on the intergovernmental side of things, I facilitated communication and actions from county commissioners all the way up to governors. Department of Interior was an awesome point in my career for a number of reasons. First of all, President Trump and both secretaries did an amazing job with the agency. But also my background was in energy and environmental work. So it kind of married my professional background in energy, environmental work, environmental policy with my, I guess, personal ambitions and interests with hunting, fishing, national parks, camping, hiking, the works. So this was, I guess, a couple jobs ago now. Now I'm in Arizona, working still on public policy issues, but far away from the action now in D.C.
Although your industry somewhat has to do with environmental review, construction, right? I'm assuming my dad's in construction, so he hasn't faced the duress of environmental review because he has smaller projects. But if you're like commercial scale, for sure, you are entangled with environmentalism. And it's so funny. I want the listeners to know that you were probably the most interesting government employee I'd ever met and interfaced with, because 2 things. You grew a pineapple in your office. That's kind of what the trademark of your work came to be, in addition to all the brilliant work you did. But also, like, you showed me some of the wallets and other goods you made from deer hides, your deer skin wallet. So I thought that was super fascinating. We became fast friends because of that, since you were very into, do-it-yourself projects. But you were very fascinating, and you were so helpful to helping me navigate the first Trump administration, because it was very kind of difficult to access it, and you were very pivotal for that. So I'm extremely grateful for you with doing that.
I want to say thank you too as well. Just like this administration, this second time around in the administration, we didn't have a lot of media or other sources that were actually highlighting the good work that we were doing. So it was fantastic to get someone to get a fair shake on kind of the work that not only Trump was demanding of the secretary, but also what Zinke and Bernhardt were doing.
Yeah, and I thought I was largely supportive of what they did, and I still was able to report very objectively on what they were doing, because especially with the monument stuff, oh my gosh, you and I had so many conversations about this, how these radical environmentalists had no clue about what monuments are. They completely bungled what the meaning of presidential authority is, and they were undermining, ironically, but not surprisingly, public lands access with that directive, opposing that directive, the review of the monuments, and nothing disappeared. They just shrunk the monuments. They were still there, but they were more in the confines of smallest area compatible, which is what Antiquities Act says. And then what also people, I think, glossed over and were very appreciative, especially with the last 4 years under Biden-Harris, your Interior Department expanded hunting and fishing access tremendously. And then you saw Biden truncate that severely, not in the most overt ways, but you did see lots of acres in Alaska closed, 60 million. You saw lead tackle and bullets banned. You saw all these little death by 1,000 cuts measures. So I think people were, and my listeners were especially grateful that the Trump administration did not erode public lands access or even your ability to go hunting and fishing. So I had to cover that because that's what was happening and transpiring. We are seeing tinges of that again. So far right now, it's been more of an energy focus, but I think as the rest of the Interior team is built out, I think Kate McGregor is going to be number 2 again at Interior. Some other people are coming back. We'll have a fantastic BLM director and Kathleen Sagama, the Fish and Wildlife Service director, Brian Nesvik from Wyoming was great on the grizzly bear and wolf issue in Wyoming. Very sober-minded biologist, understands, will follow the science as it relates to management there. So they're assembling a really good group. But before we talk about your efforts in Arizona, what would you say as someone now on the outside, what is your initial gleaning into the people who have taken over Interior under Trump 2.0? Are you satisfied so far? Are you confident they're going to kind of accelerate what they did in the first administration?
Yeah, I am actually really excited about this. My first interaction with the now Secretary of Interior, Doug Burgum, was when he was governor of North Dakota. And this is obviously a personal interaction that I had with him, but he's an incredibly thoughtful, kind, professional, and energetic guy. I'm really excited about what he's going to do with Interior, and he's just kind of, I guess, kicked off his tenure as of now. I know some of the work that he did even in North Dakota at the time about trying to, multiple use for both energy production, but also outdoor recreation. I'm excited about that. I think from our numerous meetings that we had with Secretary Zinke and the former governor, Doug Burgum, now Secretary of Interior, he was very much focused on all of the issues that fall under Department of Interior, but very much got the policy issues, the controversy, the works. I do think that he was very supportive, particularly because I spent more time with Secretary Zinke, of Zinke's efforts to expand hunting, fishing, just recreational opportunities overall. I'm really excited about that. And I think we disseminated information about what Secretary Zinke and Bernhardt were doing to the governors because it was impacting lands within their states. And he always came back supportive. And I think he's going to take some of those lessons and policy directions that he saw in the last Trump administration and build upon those. It was hard to keep up with both Secretary Zinke and Bernhardt internally within the agency because they were doing so much. Secretarial orders, identifying new lands to open up for hunting and fishing. It was a very fast-paced environment, and I assume that Burgum will do the same.
I think it's probably more fast-paced than when you worked there. I met some new Interior officials, and I think I met someone who is your successor, who took over the outreach position, if I'm not mistaken. So someone who was handling outreach like you did, I believe I connected with him. So I found someone who is handling your job, which is very cool to randomly meet, but it's DC, it's a small area, small town.
Yes.
So that's natural to happen. But yes, I think it is a lot faster paced today because of just the expectations, especially on the energy portfolio, to really kind of make up for time and some of the bad policy decisions of the last administration. And I do think they are going to equally tackle the public lands, expanding access once they build out the rest of the team because of certain freezes right now. As everyone is aware, they haven't been able to hire people as expeditiously as possible. But for those who are kind of worried about it's only going to be energy development, the conservation prong is going to be equally met and fulfilled, given what Secretary Burgum said at his hearing to be confirmed. He's a sportsman. He's an avid bow hunter, which I think is really epic. Very cool to have someone like that. He understands the issues, and I look forward to at some point connecting with him for work and maybe even this podcast. But I want to talk more about Arizona and what you've been doing outside of your professional capacity. So you are trying to resurrect and popularize an ancient form of hunting using Atlatls. Can you talk about what you've been doing in Arizona to make that a reality and what the progress or what the status of Atlatl usage in hunting is in Arizona right now?
Definitely. After the first Trump administration, I'll kind of go to the origin, but I'll make it concise here. After the first Trump administration, I left the Commonwealth of Virginia, where most people live when they work in D.C., and came out to Arizona. And, as you know, avid hunter, avid fisherman, avid outdoorsman in Virginia and kind of the surrounding states there. So as soon as I came to Arizona, I had to navigate a very different system out here in the West. We have a draw, essentially a lottery for different species, but the opportunities to hunt and the breadth of different species you can hunt in the state is fantastic. It's just so awesome out here, and I'm very lucky to live out here in the West. One of the first species I put in for was javelina, which, although, I guess kind of call it a pig out here, it's actually in the peccary family, but looks like kind of a wild pig, essentially. And that was the first hunt I had in the state of Arizona about 6 years ago now. And you're allowed to hunt with it, all the handguns, archery, muzzleloaders. And I brought my AR-15 out for it. And to be honest, it did take 5 days to track and hunt and find one. So it wasn't that difficult, but I thought maybe there was a more primitive hunting style that would make hunting the species a lot more intimate and more difficult. So I called up Arizona Game and Fish, and they said that spear hunting was not legal, which is what kind of my aim was. So I've spent the last 5 years working through Game and Fish to get that type of hunting legalized in the state.
So what does it entail for those who are unfamiliar, this type of primitive form of hunting?
Yeah, it's a spear, but when you're using an Atlatl, it's often called a dart. They're about 6 to 8 feet long. They essentially look like large arrows. They have a point just like an arrow. The whole dynamic of an arrow, just 7 to 10 feet long, essentially. And an Atlatl is one of the more primitive, if not the most primitive, ancient mechanical hunting devices on the planet. It's been found on every continent of the planet in some variation or form. It's still used in parts across the world as a hunting device, and it predates the bow and arrow. And essentially what it is I'm trying to describe it without using my hands because we're just audio, but essentially looks like a piece of wood or bone, and it has a little notch on the end and then also a handle. And what you do is you stick the dart/spear into the little point, and what it does is increases leverage, speed, and accuracy. It's like adding additional forearm. So you hold it, and it's adding that additional speed and accuracy. Phenomenal community, the primitive hunting community. When I started getting into it and practicing, and then motivated to change essentially the regulations here in Arizona, I realized there was a huge community both in Arizona, both nationally and internationally, that are fascinated with primitive hunting techniques.
That's very cool. And in the first attempt that you had, did you successfully harvest something?
I did not. In fact, it did take many years, which in some ways this is a good thing. There's a long process because it involves many steps of public input, consideration on what an ethical hunt is, about how this would lead to conservation of the species. So although it took a long time, there was a whole lot of steps involved in this. The first legal spear hunt in Arizona statehood history kicked off in the beginning of February as part of the handgun archery muzzleloader hunt, which I jokingly say it's now the sham hunt instead of the ham hunt because spear's been added. And I spent 6 days out in the Arizona desert and got very close. But I didn't believe it was an ethical throw. So did not take it, didn't get one this year. And to my knowledge, because I'm kind of tracking this, not that I need to be the first one to kill something with a spear or harvest one with a spear. I don't think anyone did at this last hunt with javelina.
That's fascinating, interesting, and that's good. I mean, what everyone thinks when you're using different modes of weapons or different kinds of weapons, rather, they think that you're just going to be reckless with either an AR-15 or a spear-like instrument such as an Atlatl. But that's very good. And I saw you write about this and kind of give an overview of the experience of, using an Atlatl for the first time in a hunt. Obviously, everyone wants to make ethical shots, and that's a very important decision in a hunter's mind. You don't want to make something rash or impractical or cause any more damage or shoot something illegal or out of season. So it's very good. You were very judicious about taking an ethical shot that you could be confident with.
It is one of those things, though. You've been hunting. Is you get sometimes you get that one opportunity. I was within about 30 yards through some heavy brush, and it was right there. And you always kind of regret is a strong word. I think you kind of mull over your decision on whether you would have let that spear fly or not. Because after on the third day, I got within 30 yards of a fairly large male javelina. I didn't see them again the rest of the time out there. So it's one of those. That's part of hunting. You can have skill and intact. You can be you can be a hard worker, but you also need a lot of luck.
For that type of tool, absolutely. I'm not sure I could do that quite yet because I'm still mastering big game hunting myself. I feel like I'm behind, yes, even though I have many, more years under my belt now. I think I've been hunting officially for 7 going on 8 years, but I haven't been able to have enough time in the field just with my crazy schedule. But I'm going to be doing some hunts this year. I'm already promised a few. But with your interest in hunting, I know you have several daughters. Have they taken an interest in learning how to hunt and fish yet, or they're not open to it quite yet?
Well, I have a 13, 10, and a 7-year-old, and they have not shown that much interest in hunting yet. However, all of them love the outdoors, love camping, love fishing, love hiking. They have yet to get into hunting, which, as a father, you always kind of want somebody to kind of follow your footsteps in some ways. But kids have a mind of their own and interests of their own.
But maybe there will be an interest down the road if they see how cool it is that their dad is doing it, how much fun it is.
That's very, very true. Could hopefully comes in the future.
I mean, I didn't pick up hunting till I was 26, so I have hope for your daughters. I think they will pick it up sooner than I did.
Me as well. I was, one of the growing population of folks that pick up hunting in adulthood. I didn't
adult onset hunters. Yes. Yeah. It sounds like a disease, but it's not. It's just like a formal way of saying someone introduced to hunting in adulthood.
Yes.
So I'm in that camp too, because I think like you, I started with fishing and camping and national park trips because it was just easier growing up in our home state of California.
Yes.
And I think there was a stigma tied to hunting at the time. Even growing up in Orange County, like it was pretty acceptable, I found out after the fact, but for some reason it was hard to do because it was very expensive. I think certain forms of hunting were prohibited. You had to go far away, like to some of the national forests, which weren't really within reach, except for, I think I was living near one where they had a lot of mountain lions, so you couldn't really hunt there if you wanted to because of the threat of mountain lions.
Well, and I also feel like the Western states, even though I think I've got a good grasp of how the system works now, it's certainly more complicated, at least in my mind, it's certainly more complicated here in Arizona with the draw, different hunting units versus Virginia. I could kill, I think it was 2 white-tailed deer in a year. There's a lot more to it, planning, logistics, and also knowledge of kind of the system in order to even get to the point of hunting. In fact, since I've learned it over the last 6 years, I've taken a lot of folks in that wanted to have tried hunting and kind of walked them through the Arizona Game and Fish website and how they go about applying for a draw. It's not easy.
It is a challenge, Western hunting, and I think from my experience, and maybe you can attest to this too with yours, to hunt, I think in a state that has more private land, even though there are challenges to accessing land, you can find plenty of people who will welcome you with open arms to use their property, with them guiding you, teaching you the ropes, or they get access, or friends of yours get access to land and they'll take you hunting. I've had both variations of that where it's less pressured. You could sense that you might be able to get something. Obviously, nothing is ever guaranteed when you're hunting. Same with fishing, but there's a higher likelihood because there are more deer that are not managed. Versus out west, you have different factors of you're dealing with a bigger play field. You may have more people you're encountering. The areas might be more highly pressurized. And if it is subjected to a lottery, might be more difficult to get the license to hunt too. So there are benefits and drawbacks, I think, to both, public and private land hunting, but it's unique to do.
Yeah, I haven't really thought about that because I guess I was lucky enough to have a friend that had private land in Virginia, but also I lived, and this is one of the kind of systems I navigated while I was hunting in Virginia of hunting on, it was a Marine Corps base,
Nice.
and kind of navigating their own kind of regulations and system. But you're right, we have access to so much more land out here. But because of that, there is a lot more hunters. There's a lot more complicated system to gain access to the land. Yeah, I guess I hadn't thought about it. There's pros and cons to both.
Yeah, both have great benefits, drawbacks. I want to do more public land hunting. I do more public land fishing, which is funny because it's just easier and you're not having to deal with so much, and it's obvious like where you can and cannot go. And then I know in Montana sometimes there are those tricky like cross corner areas where you might be hunting on public land, but it sits on private land, and if you don't get permission, it might be very difficult, in those very kind of sensitive areas. But I think most hunters wouldn't really go to that unless they're seeking out a particular parcel of land that maybe their friends have access to or something like that. So I would try to avoid like the corner problems or the corner question when you're hunting in, I think it's like Montana or Wyoming in those particular areas. But that's not the majority of public land hunting. And I think Arizona has a lot of good examples of plentiful land, which shouldn't be crossing on private property. You just have to go to different, like I think probably national forest lands, maybe some BLM lands. Yes. Cause I remember from my public lands report in Arizona, we did go to some, one of the monuments a little south of Grand Canyon does allow it, but the feds were restricting it at the time. I think it was under Biden a few years ago, 22, where they were closing off one of the national monuments or debating whether or not to keep it open to hunting. A little south of Grand Canyon. So yes, lots of good benefits to both. I don't dislike one form versus the other. I'm an equal opportunity hunter. And from the West, of course I would be for public lands. You have to be coming from that region of the world. And, I think we have a greater discussion in the outdoor industry, whether you're in policy, media, outreach, what have you, how to increase, people's aptitude to want to learn how to go hunting. I think we are seeing more people hunt. But as things get more expensive, it might be difficult sometimes for people to go conventional hunting with firearms or bows or things of that sort, or maybe they're intimidated. As someone who has hunted for the better part of their adult life, what advice do you want to impart to people who might be listening, interested in learning how to hunt, citing your example, firsthand experience? Would you like more people to hunt?
Actually, okay, that's a big loaded question there. I think the biggest thing, this at least was it was for me, the biggest impediment to getting into it was just kind of the thought that you don't have enough knowledge or skill or even being intimidated by jumping into hunting. So I guess the only advice I give is, and this is because so many gave me advice when I came on, like we said, adult onset hunting, is I asked a lot of questions. I wasn't shy. I had no shame at all admitting that I didn't know anything at all. And I reached out to a number of friends that hunted, but also even strangers. This is a oddly specific reference, but there is a number of Facebook hunting groups, particularly in Arizona, that have been incredibly helpful for folks that have been hunting for many years and providing so much advice and feedback. I know that there is, I guess, a debate amongst hunters that, hey, if we keep having more hunters, then we'll have, less opportunity to draw a tag here in Arizona. But I think for the most part, most hunters, particularly here in Arizona, see a new hunter and they remember where they were at when they first started, and try to help those folks out. So I guess the advice is, if you're even remotely interested in hunting, jump into it. Don't be shy. Ask questions of friends, relatives, and also even strangers on the internet.
People are willing to dispense information, and the wildlife agencies have plenty of resources too. They're begging for people to learn how to hunt. I had to miss, I think it was a women's bow hunting course. It was like really reasonably priced, like very affordable or almost free. Mm-hmm. And they offer clinics at reasonable prices, and they'll teach you how to handle and shoot bows and arrows, how to handle firearms, how to handle all these different kinds of hunting tools to aid you in your quest to become more knowledgeable. And they have so many, people just don't know that this is already afforded to the public as long as you have your license, things of that sort. And you have gone hunting, or even if it's your first time, or you're just getting a basic introduction, they have lots of different types of courses, seminars, webinars to get people interested. And you could as you know, simply talk to someone online, a hunter with a big platform, and say, I want to learn how to hunt. What is the best advice you have? And you could make friends out of that. It's very easy. So people are very willing to share knowledge, even maybe take you on your first hunt, depending upon if you know the person and how familiar they are with you. People want to pass on the tradition, because if we don't have more hunters, we have fewer gun purchases, which means fewer Pittman Robertson dollars. And that would be a travesty if we don't continue the participation numbers to keep those monies flowing in perpetuity.
Definitely. And I'm still offering this. I don't know if you ever even got out snakehead fishing in Virginia, but if you we don't have that out near here in Arizona.
I know.
To you. But if you come out here and take a little extra time, I'll take you out with the Atlatl and spear and at least throw at some targets out here so you can kind of see the feel of primitive hunting in Arizona.
Oh, that would be so cool. I told you I'm coming to Arizona later in April, but it's going to be such a tight schedule for me. So maybe in the future, and we could try to go trout fishing with Kwong, Representative Wynn, because we tried before in the Salt River. We saw the wild horses, didn't see much of trout. So there definitely has to be some sort of meeting of the minds to fish and maybe try Atlatl spear hunting, at least demonstrations. Next time I have more time to be in Arizona for longer.
100%. That would be awesome.
Is there anything else you want to plug about your time working at Department of Interior, Todd, or just your overall sense of, conservation, hunting, anything else you want to discuss that has not been touched on?
Oh, geez. I don't think I have anything else other than thank you for the work that you do in highlighting hunting and how it relates to conservation, because I think sometimes that lesson is lost. And for also highlighting and focusing on what presidential administrations, the executive branch does for all Americans, not just Arizonans, on opening up access to recreational activities on public lands. So I guess all I had to say is a thank you.
That's very kind. I don't want to be the only person to do it, but I hope I've led and created an example for others to model. So we'll have to revisit again, especially whenever you do more Atlatl hunting or maybe some sort of development happens. But I frequently watch what happens in the States, especially Arizona, because sometimes you see these preservationists trying to change even what the wildlife agencies are doing to institute prohibitions on certain forms of management. So it's very important to follow what happens not only federally, but also in the States, because you could lose death by 1,000 cuts, the hunting and fishing heritage. So states like yours have to fight back any efforts, for remaking wildlife agency. So any way I can help there too, I will help shine a light.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks, Todd. This was wonderful. Really appreciate you coming on the program, and I'll encourage everyone to connect with you and learn more about Atlatl hunting in Arizona.
All right. Talk soon.
If you enjoyed this installment of District of Conservation, I would love to know your feedback. Send it my way. Please be sure to leave us reviews on Apple, Spotify, or wherever podcasts are played, and also check us out on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter to never miss a beat nor a guest announcement. Thanks so much for listening to District of Conservation. I hope you have a wonderful day, and please share the podcast to those who may be interested in learning more about these critical natural resources, environment, energy issues.